My name is Lorraine Foster. I'm 67 years old, and I've spent most of my life believing that if you kept your mouth shut and your head down, the storm would pass over you. That silence was strength. That stillness meant survival. I was wrong. I live alone now in a house that creaks more than it should, where the wallpaper is peeling at the edges like it's tired of pretending. My husband, Walter, passed 4 years ago. My daughter, Elise, well, she's not dead. But she's gone, and I'm the reason for that. I grew up in the kind of household where emotions were treated like pests. You kept them outside, you didn't feed them, and if they got in, you stomped them out quick. My mother cried exactly once that I remember when my father didn't come back from the mill after a cave-in. She didn't even go to his funeral. Said grief was a luxury we couldn't afford. So I learned early, bite your tongue, hold your breath, don't make trouble. Walter was charming when we met. He had this quiet intensity about him, the kind that made you feel seen, even if he hadn't said a word. I mistook that stillness for kindness. What I didn't know was that silence can cut deeper than any shout. We married young. I was 21 working in a sewing factory. He was 28, already had a house, a steady job at the water plant, and a temper like a sleeping bear. You didn't poke it, and you sure didn't wake it. We had Elise 2 years later. She was a colicky baby, loud from the very first breath. Walter didn't like the noise. Said babies should know their place. Said we shouldn't coddle her, that we were making her soft. So I rocked her only when he wasn't home, sang to her in whispers, taught her how to make herself small. And that, right there, that was the first crack. You see, I thought I was protecting her, but I was teaching her the only language I knew, silence. When Elise was 5, she started drawing people with no mouths, just big, wide eyes and hands clutched together like they were waiting for permission to speak. I kept the pictures on the fridge, called them cute, never asked her what they meant. Because what if I didn't like the answer? What if it was about me? Elise was bright, curious. She asked questions that made strangers laugh and neighbors uncomfortable. She wanted to know why we always locked the front door at 4 p.m., why Daddy didn't smile when she danced, why I always said, "I'm fine," when my eyes were red. I told her some things didn't need answers. That's how I silenced her, not with hands, but with fear, with my own cowardice passed down like a family recipe no one liked, but everyone used. Walter never hit her. I want to make that clear. He didn't have to. He had a look, a sideways glance that could freeze the air in a room. He believed children should be seen, not heard. And if they were seen too much, that was a problem. I told myself we were doing our best, that all parents made mistakes. But I started noticing things. Elise stopped asking questions. She stopped drawing. She started flinching when Walter cleared his throat, and she apologized for things she hadn't done. I should have said something. I should have fought for her. Instead, I made excuses. I told her, "That's just how your father is," and God help me, she believed me. Elise was 8 when I first saw the fear in her eyes and chose not to name it. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those muggy Missouri days where even the trees seemed too tired to rustle. I was in the kitchen, slicing tomatoes for dinner, and Walter was in the living room, watching the game, his beer sweating on the side table. Elise tiptoed in from outside, dirt on her knees and a hole in her shirt, carrying a mason jar with a praying mantis inside. She looked proud, beaming really, and she ran up to Walter, saying, "Look, Daddy, I found her in the garden. She's guarding the roses." I froze. I remember that so clearly. The sound of her little feet on the hardwood, the pride in her voice, the way she was already holding the jar up like an offering. I remember, too, the way Walter's face changed. Not in some loud, theatrical way, just a twitch of the mouth, a narrowing of the eyes. "Jesus, Elise," he said, without looking up. "Why are you always bringing bugs in here? What are you, some kind of boy?" Her face didn't crumble right away. It was slower than that, like watching a flower close up for the night, petal by petal. She looked down at the jar. The smile fell away. She mumbled an apology and went straight to her room without another word. I waited for Walter to realize how cruel that was, even if he hadn't raised his voice. He didn't. He just reached for his beer and changed the channel. And me, I said nothing. I didn't go to her. I didn't sit on the edge of her bed and tell her that she wasn't too much or too loud or too curious. I didn't tell her that her spirit wasn't something to be shamed or hidden. I just kept slicing tomatoes with trembling hands and told myself she needed to toughen up. Because back then, that's what I thought strength was. Endurance. Silence. Swallowing the pain and smiling through it. What I didn't understand, and what took me far too long to learn, was that when you stay silent long enough, your child learns to stay silent too. By the time Elise was 10, she hardly spoke at the dinner table. She answered questions with nods or one-word replies. She kept her hands in her lap, her back straight, her eyes cast low, like she was trying not to disturb the air. Teachers called her well-behaved. Other parents praised her manners. And I, like a fool, beamed with pride. They didn't see the way she tensed when Walter walked into a room. They didn't hear the panic in her voice when I was 5 minutes late picking her up from school. They didn't see the bruises because there weren't any, but just because you can't see the damage doesn't mean it isn't there. Sometimes it lives in the way a child stops laughing. Elise had once laughed all the time, loud, unapologetic belly laughs. She used to laugh at her own knock-knock jokes, at cartoons, at the sound the toaster made when it popped. But one day I realized I hadn't heard her laugh in weeks, months maybe. It was like someone had turned the volume down on her joy, one notch at a time, until it disappeared entirely. And I, God help me, I let it happen. Walter's silences were thunderous. He didn't need to scream to dominate a room. He could make an entire dinner unbearable just by sighing at the wrong moment. He could cut Elise down with nothing more than a raised eyebrow or a tight-lipped smirk. He didn't call her names. He didn't throw things. But he stole her voice all the same. And I held the door open for him to do it. I started telling myself stories to survive it, that she was just shy, that she'd grow out of it, that it was better this way, better than chaos, better than screaming, better than the house I'd grown up in, where plates shattered and doors slammed, and no one said, "I'm sorry." But silence is a weapon too, and I had chosen it. When Elise turned 12, she wrote me a birthday card that I still have tucked away in a drawer. It wasn't one of those store-bought ones. She'd made it herself out of construction paper and glue. On the front was a drawing of the two of us, stick figures holding hands. Her figure was smiling, mine wasn't. Inside, she'd written, "Happy birthday, Mom. I love you, even when you're quiet. I know sometimes your heart is loud, even when your mouth isn't." I remember crying in the bathroom after reading that, not out of joy, not because I was moved, but because I knew deep down that she saw me, that she saw I was scared, that I was hurting. And instead of blaming me, she was trying to comfort me. My child was comforting me. That should have been my wake-up call, but it wasn't. It wasn't until much later, years later, that I realized what I'd done, what I'd failed to do, that I'd built a home where the safest thing a child could do was stay silent, that I'd called it peace when it was really just suppression. Walter never laid a hand on us, but he taught both of us to shrink, and I taught Elise that shrinking was how you survived. It wasn't until her 15th birthday that I saw the final warning sign, the last red flag waving in plain sight, begging me to look. But by then, it was too late. And I'll tell you what happened next, in the next part. Elise turned 15 on a Wednesday. A cold, gray April day, the kind where it feels like the sky forgot how to be anything but heavy. I baked her a cake, box mix, chocolate, the kind she liked when she was little, and I even tried to decorate it, though the icing kept running and the lettering looked like a kindergartner wrote it. Walter didn't come home until after 9. No explanation, no gift, not even a card. He walked through the door smelling of diesel and distant roads, nodded in Elise's direction, and went straight to the recliner, turned on the news, popped open a beer. She sat at the table, staring at the 2 flickering candles on her cake. I'd used a 1 and a 5 crooked in the icing, leaning like they were tired. "Do you want to blow them out?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. She looked at me for a moment, just a moment, and I saw something raw there, something fragile and fraying. But then she smiled, thin as paper, and said, "Make a wish for me, Mom." I did. I wished for time to slow down. I wished for 1 more year to fix what I hadn't dared face. That night, after she went to bed, I found a napkin in the trash with lipstick blotted on it. My shade. The one she wasn't supposed to touch. I held it in my hand for what felt like forever, and then I knocked on her door. She opened it in pajamas, hair up, face washed. "Elise," I said gently, "did you wear my lipstick today?" She blinked, then shrugged. "Just around the house. I didn't go anywhere." There was a pause between us. Not long, barely a breath. But I felt the gap, like a canyon cracking open. I had two choices. I could scold her, or I could ask the real question hiding underneath. Why do you feel like you have to dress up when no one's looking? But I chose silence. I just said, okay, try not to waste it, and turned away. That was the last real conversation we had. 2 weeks later, I came home from the grocery store and found her gone. No forced entry, no struggle, no blood, just gone. Her room was unnaturally clean, the bed made, the floor swept. Too clean, the kind of clean that says, I won't be back. There was a folded sheet of notebook paper on her pillow. It read, Mom, I'm sorry. I can't keep pretending this is okay. I love you. Please don't come after me. I need to learn who I am when I'm not afraid. E. That was it. No clues, no contact. Not a single soul had seen her leave. The police called it a low-priority runaway. She was 15. No signs of foul play. No indication she was in danger. Just another teenage girl with a backpack full of notebooks and silence. But I knew better, because girls like Elise don't run to something, they run from it. And I, God help me, I was what she was running from. Walter barely reacted, said, she'll be back. They always come back. Then he turned back to his stew and didn't mention her again. Didn't search, didn't cry, didn't ask questions. But I did. I tore through her room like it might confess to me. I opened every drawer, flipped every notebook, searched the closet like maybe she was still hiding there. And then, beneath her mattress, I found a journal, a small one, green cover, frayed edges, no lock, no stickers, just her handwriting on every page, slanted and tense. I read every word, and I wish I hadn't. Not because I didn't want to know, but because the truth was so much worse than my denial. She wrote about how she felt invisible in her own home, about how my silences made her feel like she was always walking on broken glass, about Walter's coldness, and how it felt like she was being punished for taking up space. But the part that broke me, the part that still echoes in my bones, was this line. I think Mom loves me. I just don't think she knows how to show it without disappearing. I sat there on her bed, holding that journal like it was a gravestone. Because in a way, it was. It marked the death of every lie I had told myself about being a good mother. I thought I was protecting her, but I was vanishing in front of her eyes and calling it love. That night, Walter asked if I'd make him a sandwich. I looked at him like I was seeing him for the first time. No, I said. Just that. One word. He blinked. Excuse me? I said no, Walter. It was the first time I'd ever refused him anything outright. And it was like breaking the seal on something ancient and buried. He narrowed his eyes, looked like he might say something cruel, but I stood up, journal still in hand, and walked past him. I went into the kitchen, locked the door behind me, and sat on the floor until morning. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. because somewhere out there, my daughter was trying to learn how to breathe again, and I was just now realizing I'd been holding the air from her for 15 years. The next morning, I left. I didn't pack a suitcase, didn't leave a note, just grabbed my purse, Elise's journal, and the car keys. I walked out the front door while Walter was still snoring in his recliner, mouth slack, TV flickering static on his face. I drove, not toward Elise. I didn't know where she'd gone, and her letter had made one thing achingly clear: don't come after me. But I needed distance. I needed air. I needed silence that wasn't weaponized. I ended up 3 towns over, at a motel that smelled like bleach and wet carpet. I sat on the bed and opened her journal again, flipping to a page I hadn't noticed before. There was a list scrawled in the corner, no title, no explanation, just words. Things I want: to sleep without checking the door, to speak without shaking, to laugh and not be corrected, to be seen, to be heard, to not be the mirror of someone else's fear. I read it over and over until the ink blurred from my tears. That list was Elise's prayer, and I had stood between her and every single line of it. I'd spent years calling myself strong for enduring Walter's silence, for staying, for adapting. But strength, I was starting to learn, wasn't about staying quiet. It was about knowing when the silence was killing someone you love and breaking it anyway. That night, I called a hotline. I'd never done anything like that before. The woman on the line had a soft voice. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush me, just listened. And for the first time in my life, I spoke the whole truth out loud. About Walter, about Elise, about the way fear had disguised itself as order in our house. About the way I'd mistaken survival for safety. When I was done, the woman said something I will never forget. Your daughter didn't leave because you were cruel. She left because you weren't brave yet. But you're here now, that counts. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I stayed at that motel for 2 days. When I returned, Walter was gone. Took his toolbox, some clothes, the last of the bourbon. Left the recliner and the TV and a plate of half-eaten sausage congealing on the counter. No note, no apology, and I didn't care, because something in me had changed. I cleaned the house, not like a chore, but like a ritual. I threw out the chipped dishes he always used, took down the curtains Elise hated, found her old drawings buried in a drawer, and hung them on the wall, mouths and all. I turned our home into a place I wished I'd raised her in, and then I started writing to her, letters I couldn't send. I didn't know where she was or if she'd ever want to read them, but I wrote them anyway. Long, rambling things, not explanations, not excuses, just truths, honest ones, ugly ones. You were never too much, Elise. I was just too scared to meet you where you lived. I didn't know how to protect you without disappearing, but I see that now. I see you now. If you're reading this, I hope your laugh is loud. I hope no one ever tells you to quiet it again. I filled a shoebox with those letters, one every week, each one signed the same way. Love, the mother I'm still learning how to be. That fall, I started volunteering at the public library. It was small, just 2 rooms and a basement, but kids came in every day after school. Some were loud and wild, some were soft and skittish. I watched them from behind the circulation desk, wondering which ones were Elise in different forms. One girl, Madeline, reminded me of her. Big brown eyes, always sketching dragons and haunted forests. She never said much, but one day I complimented her drawing and she just looked up and whispered, "Most adults don't care what I make." I told her, "The right ones do." She smiled, just barely, and I swear I saw Elise in that flicker. That's when it hit me. Maybe I couldn't bring my daughter back, but I could become the kind of woman she'd recognize from a distance, the kind who asked twice, the kind who didn't flinch from pain, the kind who left the porch light on, not as a trap, but as a promise. The letter came on a Thursday. I almost didn't check the mailbox that day. It had rained all morning, and the air was thick with that heavy, earthy scent, like the sky had been wrung out like a sponge. I was bringing in laundry from the line, arms full of damp towels, when I saw the little white envelope wedged between the electric bill and a grocery store flyer. It had no return address. Just my name, Lorraine Foster, written in handwriting I would have known anywhere. Sharp, slanted, slightly too tight, like she was holding her breath while writing it. My knees buckled. I didn't even make it back inside before I opened it. I just stood on the porch, trembling hands tearing at the paper like it might vanish if I hesitated. The note inside was short, so short. "I'm not ready for a phone call, but I got your letters. I read every one. I'm safe. I'm working at a coffee shop. I still draw. I still think of you. Please don't write back yet. But thank you. E." That was it. No address, no photo, no invitation. But it was her. Her voice after all that time. Her words, gentle and cautious, like she was holding them out at arm's length, still not sure if I could be trusted. And I sank to the porch steps and wept. Not the keening grief I'd known before. This was something else, a kind of holy ache, like hearing a whisper through the door you thought would never open again. She was alive, she was safe, and she hadn't torn me completely out of her life. For months after that, I didn't write. I kept the promise. I didn't go looking. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even say her name out loud, outside of prayer. Instead, I turned the focus inward. I joined a support group for mothers of estranged children. We met in the back room of a Methodist church every other Tuesday. 7 women, all with stories stitched in pain. Some of their kids were addicts. Others had joined cults, married into violence, gone no contact without a single word of why. But when I told them my story, when I said, I stayed silent too long and my daughter learned it better than I ever intended, they didn't judge me. They just nodded. One woman, Sherry, who wore 3 rings on each hand and never stopped knitting, looked at me and said, sometimes the only apology we get to make is the one we live. That stuck with me, so I started living mine. I gave up the library job and applied at a teen outreach center instead. It wasn't glamorous. Mostly I sorted donations, bras, tampons, hoodies, toothpaste, but on Fridays we hosted quiet hours for girls who just needed a safe place to sit and be still. That's where I met Lana. She was 17, emancipated, working night shifts, and barely scraping by. She never spoke in group, never asked for anything, but always came early and left late. One Friday, she stayed after everyone else had gone. I was wiping down tables when she said, "It's weird seeing an old lady who doesn't talk at people." I laughed. "You calling me old?" She shrugged. "Older than me? You're not like the others. You listen weird." "Weird how?" She paused. Like you're waiting to forgive something." That gutted me, because she was right. I was. I didn't say anything profound, just handed her a granola bar and said, "Well, if you ever want to be heard, I've got good ears." And she said, "Maybe, one day." As she walked out, I remembered Elise at 15, how she used to look over her shoulder like she was checking for exits even in her own home. And I made myself a vow right then. If Elise never came back, I would still keep becoming someone she could come back to. Not because I deserved it, but because she deserved that mother. The mother I hadn't been when it counted. It was almost a year later when I heard from her again. I had stopped expecting it, not out of bitterness, but out of grace. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop trying to control someone else's timing. I'd made my amends in action, in patience, in becoming. Whether Elise ever saw it or not was no longer the point. And then, one Saturday morning, I opened my front door and found a package. No name, no return address, just a brown cardboard box about the size of a shoebox, sealed with neat strips of clear tape. I brought it inside with careful hands, like it might shatter if I blinked wrong. Inside was a book, not just any book, her book, a worn spiral-bound sketch pad with a cover that used to be lavender, but had faded into a kind of ghostly gray. I recognized it immediately. She used to carry it everywhere, on walks, on car rides, even to church. The first page was blank. The second held a drawing. It was me, but not as I was, not a photograph likeness. No, it was how she saw me. Hair loose, not in a bun like I always wore it, eyes soft, wrinkles drawn with care, not shame. My hands were open in my lap, not folded, not clenched. And around me, faintly sketched, were words, scattered, faint, almost hidden in the folds of my sweater, the strands of my hair. I missed you. I wanted to scream. Why didn't you ask again? I still love you. You weren't the monster, but you were the silence. I pressed the page to my chest. Not for comfort, for truth. The rest of the sketchbook was a timeline in ink and charcoal. Pages of trees with hollow trunks, girls with masks, a house with no windows, a door ajar, a hand reaching back, and then, halfway through, the light changed. The lines got warmer, softer. There was a picture of a porch light glowing in the dark, of 2 teacups on a table, of a letter being slipped into a mailbox, of a girl with a scar across her cheek, smiling just slightly. The final page wasn't a drawing. It was a note, taped in like a last breath. I'm not ready to come home, but I'm not angry anymore. I'm with a family now, not blood, but safe. I'm in school again, studying art therapy. I tell girls like me that survival isn't shameful, and I tell them that healing isn't linear. Some days I still feel broken, but now I know how to name the pieces. You taught me that eventually, when you started speaking. I don't need anything from you, but if you ever want to meet me someday, not as my mother, but as the woman you've become, maybe we can talk. Elise. I must have read that page 100 times. I didn't cry right away. I just sat in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the dusty blinds, and whispered, "Thank you." Not because she owed me anything, but because that letter was a gift I hadn't earned, and she gave it anyway. That night I didn't write a response. Instead, I went out back and planted a row of lilac bushes, her favorite. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. No dreams, no guilt, just quiet. But this time, not the kind that hurts, the kind that holds you. Life didn't magically change after that package. I didn't get a phone call the next week. Elise didn't show up on my porch with a suitcase and tears. There was no movie ending, but something in me shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just deeper. A kind of loosening, a kind of breathing. For the first time in decades, I wasn't carrying the ache like a punishment. I was carrying it like a seed, something that still might grow if I let it. I started doing small things differently. I joined a ceramics class at the community center, even though I had no clue how to shape anything. My first mug looked like a crushed mushroom, but I glazed it anyway. Wrote, "Ask twice" on the bottom in shaky black paint. I still drink my tea out of it. I started leaving my porch light on every night, not because I thought Elise would come, but because I wanted someone to see it. I kept volunteering at the youth center. Lana came back more often. We didn't talk about her past, not directly, but one day she brought me a drawing, just handed it over and walked away. It was a picture of a woman standing in a hallway, a light coming from one open door behind her, and in her hand, a key. On the back, she'd written, "You didn't save me, but you made it easier to save myself." I taped it above my writing desk. Every week, I still write to Elise. Not because I think she's reading, but because it keeps me honest. Because it reminds me of who I'm still becoming. Some letters are long, some are just a few words. I planted more lilacs today. They're blooming early. Do you still draw with charcoal or did you switch to ink? Your favorite sweater is still in the bottom drawer. I haven't touched it, but I did stop smelling it. I think I'm finally learning how to speak without trembling. I love the person you've become, even if I only know her in fragments. There are still hard days. Days when I catch myself standing in the hallway outside her old room, hand resting on the doorframe, aching for a conversation we may never have. Days when I hear laughter outside and think, for just a heartbeat, that could be her. But then I breathe and I remember, she isn't gone. She's just becoming, and so am I. There's a quote I read once. I don't remember the author, but it went something like, "Forgiveness isn't waiting for an apology. It's learning how to stop bleeding from the wound." I used to think I needed Elise's forgiveness to heal, but I don't, because the wound isn't bleeding anymore. It's a scar now, and it doesn't hide me. It tells the story I was too afraid to say out loud for far too long. Sometimes girls at the shelter ask me if I have kids. I always say the same thing. I have a daughter. She's finding her way, and so am I. It's the truest thing I know, and that's enough. The letter came 2 years after the package. It was a plain white envelope, no stamp, no postmark, hand-delivered, slipped through the slot in my front door while I was in the backyard weeding the garden. At first, I thought it was a flyer, some local notice. But the moment I picked it up, I recognized the handwriting. No name, just one word on the front, Mom. I held it like glass. Like if I breathed too hard, it might vanish. This time, I didn't hesitate. I sat right down on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, sunlight pooling across the tile like honey, and opened it. Inside were 2 pieces of paper. The first was a note, longer than her others. I've been thinking about the word mother. For a long time I thought it meant silence. I thought it meant rules and distance and folding myself into the shape of someone else's comfort. But now, after time and therapy and women who held space for my anger, I think mother can mean something else. It can mean change. It can mean apology without expectation. It can mean someone who grows even when no one's watching. I don't want to come home, but I would like to meet you, not as the girl I was, not as the mother you used to be, just as us. Now, I'll be in town next Saturday. There's a bench by the duck pond near Adams Park. Noon. If you're not there, I'll understand. But I hope you come. Elise. The second page was a drawing, pencil on soft cream paper, detailed, careful, beautiful. It showed 2 women sitting side by side on a wooden bench, not facing each other, but leaning ever so slightly inward. Between them, a small paper cup of coffee. One woman had her hands clasped in her lap. The other's hand rested gently on the bench, palm up, open. No labels, no titles, no names, just presence. I stared at it for a long time, and then I placed it on the table next to a candle I kept lit for her, the one I used to call my hope flame, even when I wasn't sure I deserved to hope. The rest of that week moved slow. I baked bread I didn't eat, cleaned a house that didn't need cleaning, sat on the porch every evening, listening to the wind chimes she'd made in 6th grade, bent spoons and bottle caps clinking softly, their little song echoing across the years. And when Saturday came, I dressed plain. Soft blue shirt, slacks, no perfume, just me, as I am. I walked to the park with my palms sweating and my heart in my throat. I got there early. The bench was still there, weathered wood, one slat split near the back, the kind that creaks when you sit. I waited. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what I'd say. But when I saw her walking toward me, older, taller, her hair longer than I remembered, I didn't feel fear. I felt recognition, not of the child I'd raised, but of the woman she'd become. She sat beside me, not too close, but not far. And we didn't speak, not right away, we just sat. Two women, on a bench, on a warm day, with so many words behind us and no rush to use them. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I understood something. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's space, a pause, a breath, a beginning. That was 5 months ago. We don't talk every week. We don't pretend we're back to what we once were. We're not. We're new. She sends postcards now, sometimes a photo, sometimes a poem. Once, just a pressed lilac flower in wax paper. And I keep the porch light on, not because I expect her to walk through it, but because now she knows she can, no matter what. And me? I no longer confuse silence with strength. I've learned the strength is in showing up anyway, in asking again, in loving louder, even, especially, when you're afraid. Because daughters don't just inherit our eyes or our smile. They inherit how we love. And if they're lucky, if we're brave, they grow beyond what we gave them. They become the light we never knew how to be. Elise did that. And now, maybe I am too. One letter at a time, one girl at a time, one morning, one bench, one soft hello at a time. It's never too late to learn how to speak or to finally be heard.